All right, guys, we're back for part two. Just to recap what we were finishing up a couple seconds ago on the other video, remember that England had always kind of imported cotton cloth, calico cloth, from India. Okay, now of course this is a big hit in England, just as it's a big hit everywhere else, whether it's in the Indian Sea Trade Network, in China, and even in the United States. They love cotton. Remember, it's durable, it's comfortable, it's breathable, it can be washed easy. Okay, so this is a big hit. Now the problem is there's a lot of wool manufacturers that typically don't like the competition from the cotton. It's like, well, wool, cotton, I mean, you do the math here. What would you rather wear? I'm sure you're probably watching this video wearing a cotton shirt, not a wool shirt, okay? So with that being said, what the wool manufacturers did, they convinced Parliament to put tariffs on Indian cotton cloth. Now that's going to have a lot of effects later on, okay? Because, it's going to make prices for Indian cotton cloth very, very high. So now instead of importing the cloth, they're going to import the raw cotton and they're going to make the cloth in England. Now, that's going to have some big effects, and let's talk about it because this is important in terms of a transition from the cottage industry to the factory system as well. Even before the Industrial Revolution, England was making cotton cloth. They were just doing it in a little bit different way. What England and everywhere else in continental Europe did is that they used either the cottage system or the putting out system. It's the same thing. So let me explain how the putting out system would work. I am the entrepreneur. I am the salesman. I sell cotton cloth. Well, I don't make the cotton cloth, I just sell it. So what I am going to do is I'm going to get the raw materials. I will buy the raw materials, the raw cotton or the needles, whatever you need, and I will go to the different farms throughout England. And I will take it to the granny on the farm and I'll say, look, you're not planting anything right now. You're not pulling crops out of the ground. You're just sitting here twiddling your thumbs. Well, while you're twiddling your thumbs, why don't you make me some cotton cloth and I'll pay you? All right, and so Granny's like, oh, thank you, I will do this. I'm happy I'm getting some cotton cloth made. I'll say, Granny, I'll come back in 4 months. So I go out and I'll go to the next farm and say the same thing. And that granny and that family will do the same thing. Well, 4 months later, I come back and Granny has knitted me, 10 meters of cotton cloth. And I'm like, this is amazing, Granny. I will pay you $10 a meter. Or it wouldn't be dollars, 10 pounds a meter. And so I give her 100 pounds. She's happy. I'm happy. I will go and do that to all the different farms and I'll accumulate this cotton cloth. Then I will take it to market in the cities and sell it for 25 pounds a meter. And I will make a profit. So that's how the putting out system would typically work in England. If you wanted something manufactured, the entrepreneur, the salesman would go to the different farms, they would go to the rural areas, and they would put out the materials. That's why it was called the putting out system, okay? Now, with the putting out system, with the cottage industry, also keep in mind that it was also, the roles in it was divided by gender. Typically, the women would weave the thread, would make the threads, take all the little fibers, twist them together to get a thread, and then once you had the thread, the men would go ahead and weave. Well, in business terms, the constraint, the thing that took the longest time to do was actually making the thread. So the women would spend tons and tons and tons and tons of time making the thread, while the man just kind of sat there and like, okay, I'm just waiting for the thread. Once you give me some thread, I can weave it. So really what you needed was a quicker, more efficient way to make thread. And we talked about new machines in that last video. Well, the new machine that is going to get created in the late 18th century is going to be called the spinning jenny. It was created by John Kay. Now, what the spinning jenny does is it produces thread using a machine, which makes it more efficient, cheaper, and you can produce tons of thread. Okay? Well, now the man who weaves all the thread, he is overwhelmed. It's easy to make the thread now, but now it's hard to weave it. So now the constraint, the thing that takes the longest to do in the process, is the weaving process. Well, of course, with the Industrial Revolution, if you use the machines to solve one problem, you're going to create a machine to solve the next problem. And what they create is mechanized looms, they create the flying shuttle, and that was a process, it was a machine that would automatically weave the thread. Now, guys, you've got to understand how important this is. You can now produce cotton cloth at an unprecedented rate, faster than anybody has ever produced, cloth in the history of man, and it's cheap. So, of course, England has an abundance of cheap cotton cloth. They'll sell it to everybody in England, but then they're going to sell it to everybody else in the world at an incredibly cheap price. And they will make an incredible amount of money. They will amass an incredible amount of wealth. Now, there is one last part to this process. When we're talking about the constraint, the thing that takes the longest in the process, it's not the making of the thread anymore. It's not the weaving. Really, the constraint now is getting the raw cotton. Okay? You got to understand, when you get raw cotton, it is not like you're getting a bag of little cotton puff balls, like, oh, look, it's a little white cotton puff ball. Like when you pull it, it has a bunch of impurities in it. It's got parts of seeds and stems and leaves and all kinds of nasty stuff in there. You got to pick out by hand. Well, that is an incredibly long process to take care of until 1794. So in 1793, Eli Whitney will create the cotton gin. And the cotton gin was a machine that separated the raw cotton from all the seeds and the stems and the impurities, okay? Now, of course, with that being said, we're going to see that the United States actually, because that's where Eli Whitney was from, becomes one of the largest producers of raw cotton in the world, okay? Now, let's start getting to the money part of this and let's start wrapping this up. By the mid-19th century, so 1850, okay, pretty much all kinds of production, like when you made something, it was transformed by either using a machine or using a steam-driven machine or division of labor or both. Anything you made now was totally transformed from the way it was done 100 years earlier, okay? All right, Britain by the mid-19th century has become very powerful in international trade. And when I'm saying very powerful, they are the 800-pound gorilla. They are the alpha male. They hold all the cards because they have all the wealth. Okay? Britain by this time is going to become the most powerful nation in the world, and arguably it was due to industrialization. Okay? Now, look, don't be stupid, okay? If somebody invents something awesome and does something awesome, everybody else is going to want to copy it. And don't be silly. Other nations in continental Europe, will they copy the English model? Yes, they will use machines. They will industrialize as well. And we're talking about Western Europe typically, all right? Eastern Europe, it'll take a little bit longer. They'll catch on in the really the 20th century. Okay? And then, of course, the United States will follow as well. Okay? All right, now, tomorrow we'll talk about some of the global impacts of the Industrial Revolution. All right, y'all stay safe.